Martin from M&D Lawn Care did not become famous by chasing attention. He became famous by knocking on doors most people ignored, cutting grass nobody could afford to cut, and turning forgotten yards back into homes. But when the videos slowed down, people started asking the wrong question. They asked where Martin went. The real question is what helping everyone quietly cost him. The man behind the mold before millions of people knew his face, Martin Hernandez, was not a YouTube personality. He was a working man in Texas. That part matters because M&D Lawn Care did not begin as a content idea. It did not start with a thumbnail strategy, a viral hook, or a plan to build a feel-good internet brand. It started with work. Hot, physical, ordinary work. The kind that begins early, ends late, and leaves your shirt soaked before most people finish their first coffee. Martin built his life around lawns, equipment, customers, and responsibility. In Channelview, near Houston, he ran M&D Lawn Care like many small business owners run their lives. One job at a time, one customer at a time, one week of bills after another. There was no guarantee that the business would grow. Lawn care is not easy money. The outside world sees a finished yard. They do not see the fuel, blades, repairs, broken equipment, long drives, heat exhaustion, cleanup, scheduling, and pressure making sure every job looks good enough for the customer to call again. That was Martin's real world. He was not sitting behind a desk directing people. He was the one loading equipment, mowing, trimming, hauling debris, and cleaning up after properties that had sometimes been neglected for months. Over time, his reputation grew because he did the simple things consistently. He showed up. He worked hard. He did not rush the finish. He treated each property like it mattered. And away from the business, he was also a father. Martin was raising Daniel, and that relationship became the heart of everything the audience would later love. Daniel did not simply appear when the camera arrived. He grew up around the work. He watched his father handle customers, maintain equipment, solve problems, and push through long days in the Texas heat. That kind of training is different from formal school. It happens in real time. A mower breaks. A customer changes the plan. A yard is worse than expected. A fence blocks access. The weather turns. A quote has to be fair. A job has to be finished before dark. A young son watches how his father responds. That is where M&D Lawn Care really formed. Not on YouTube. In the truck. On job sites. In the heat. In the small decisions Martin made every day when nobody was filming him. By the time the world discovered them, Martin and Daniel were not performing a father-son partnership. They already had one. That is why people believed them. The yard that changed the business, the turning point, was not dramatic from the outside. There was no celebrity endorsement, no investor, no big TV appearance, no viral challenge created in a marketing room. It was one woman and one overgrown yard. Martin and Daniel came across someone who needed lawn care but could not afford it. She had more important things to pay for. Medication, basic needs, life. To another business, that could have been the end of the conversation. No payment, no job. That is how the world usually works. But Martin did the yard anyway, free. And that one decision changed the direction of M&D Lawn Care. Because once they saw that situation clearly, it became hard to unsee. If one person was struggling like that, how many others were behind closed doors, ashamed of their yard, afraid of city fines, unable to physically maintain the property, or forced to choose between food, medicine, utilities, and basic home care? That is the part outsiders often miss. An overgrown yard is not always laziness. Sometimes it is sickness. Sometimes it is grief. Sometimes it is disability. Sometimes it is poverty. Sometimes it is an elderly person who used to do everything alone and suddenly cannot. Sometimes it is a family trapped in a house that no longer looks like they are trying, even though they are trying every day just to survive. That is a deeper story behind M&D Lawn Care. The grass was never just grass. It was a visible sign of invisible pressure. Martin understood that because he was not looking at the yard like content. He was looking at it like work that could be done, a problem with a mower-sized solution. Something practical, immediate, and human. So they began setting aside time to help people for free. Elderly homeowners, disabled residents, families in financial difficulty, people who have been staring at their own yards for months, feeling overwhelmed, embarrassed, or trapped. The videos came later. At first, the channel was simple. Mowing, trimming, cleaning, before and after shots. Satisfying transformations. The kind of content people watch because it feels calming to see chaos become order. But as the free project continued, the audience began responding to something deeper than clean edges and fresh grass. They were watching relief. They were watching people get a piece of dignity back. A yard that looked abandoned became a home again. A homeowner who felt ashamed could open the door without embarrassment. A disabled person who could not physically manage the work could breathe. A family worried about code violations or neighborhood complaints suddenly had one less burden on their shoulders. That is why the channel grew. Not because Martin tried to be inspirational, because the work was. The viral success nobody sees properly when M&D Lawn Care videos began reaching larger audiences. Everything changed. Millions of people love transformation videos. There is something naturally satisfying about seeing an overgrown yard restored. Tall grass gets knocked down. Edges appear. Sidewalks reemerge. Trash is cleared. A property that looked forgotten suddenly looks cared for. But M&D had something most channels did not. A reason. The videos were not only about the transformation of a yard. They were about the transformation of someone's daily life. That made the audience care more. They were not simply watching a mower move through grass. They were watching Martin and Daniel help someone who could not easily help themselves. That emotional connection pushed the channel beyond normal lawn care content. People shared the videos. Comments poured in. Local news noticed. Larger publications noticed. The father-son team became known far beyond their local service area. Viewers from around the world began following projects in Houston neighborhoods they had never visited and probably never would. But viral attention has a cost. That is where the mystery begins. When a channel grows, viewers see the numbers. More views, more subscribers, more comments, more attention. To the audience, growth looks like freedom. More success should mean more help, more time, more videos, more money, more everything. But for Martin, growth also meant more pressure. More people needing help. More requests. More expectations. More comments asking when the next video would come. More eyes watching every decision. More physical work needed to keep the promise real. A regular viewer sees a 20-minute video. Martin and Daniel live the 8-hour job behind it. Sometimes longer. Before the first mower even starts, someone has to find the property, contact the homeowner, get permission, inspect the yard, prepare equipment, plan the cleanup, watch for hazards, and decide whether the job is possible. Then comes the actual work. Tall grass can hide snakes, broken glass, sharp metal, holes, trash, dog waste, insects, abandoned objects, unstable surfaces, and anything else a neglected property can swallow. A yard transformation may look peaceful when edited, but in real life it is heavy labor. And Martin kept doing that labor himself. Even as he got older, he was still out there in the Texas heat, operating equipment, lifting, trimming, cutting, and cleaning. That matters because the channel's success did not remove the physical cost. It amplified it. The audience saw kindness. Martin felt the weight of keeping kindness going. WHY people started asking what happened when upload patterns change online. People panic. There is a strange relationship between creators and audiences. Viewers may love a person, but they also get used to a schedule. When videos become less frequent, speculation begins quickly. Is he sick? Did something happen to the family? Did the business fall apart? Did father and son have problems? Did they quit? With Martin, those questions became louder because fans had developed real affection for him. He did not seem like a typical influencer. He seemed sincere, modest, and grounded. Daniel often handled more of the talking, especially because Martin was not as fluent in English, but Martin's presence carried the channel. Viewers liked watching him work. They liked his quiet reactions. They liked the way he approached homeowners. They liked that he seemed more interested in doing the job right than turning himself into a character. So when people noticed changes, they filled the silence with theories. But the reliable public information does not support a dramatic scandal, secret feud, or serious confirmed health crisis. The truth appears much simpler and more human. Martin did not disappear. The work changed. As M&D Lawn Care grew, the operation became harder to manage as just a simple local business plus a YouTube channel. Free projects take time and money. Paid jobs still matter because they keep the business alive. Equipment still breaks. Fuel still costs money. Heat still drains a body. Homeowners still need real help, not rush content. That is the part viewers often forget. You cannot build a charitable model only on good intentions. Someone has to pay for gas. Someone has to maintain the mower. Someone has to replace blades. Someone has to cover lost revenue when a free job takes a day that could have gone to a paying customer. M&D Lawn Care has always had to balance two realities. The business needs to survive. The mission needs to continue. That balance is difficult. If they take too many free jobs, the business suffers. If they focus only on paid work, the mission that made people love them weakens. If they post too often, the work can become rushed. If they post less, the audience start worrying. That is the impossible pressure Martin ended up carrying. The internet wanted a constant stream of kindness. But kindness still has to fit inside a human body, a family schedule, a business budget, and a Texas workday. The hidden cost of kindness, this is the original twist in Martin's story. What really happened to him was not one shocking event. It was accumulation. Years of labor, years of heat, years of helping people, years of carrying equipment, years of being a father, business owner, worker, and public figure at the same time. Years of trying to keep the work honest while the audience kept growing. That kind of pressure does not always explode. Sometimes it quietly changes the pace. That is why the title, What Really Happened to Martin, is so interesting. People expect a dramatic reveal. They expect illness, conflict, disappearance, or betrayal. But sometimes a real story is more grounded and more valuable. Martin became proof that good work can become heavy too. Helping people sounds beautiful from the outside, and it is beautiful, but it can also be exhausting. Every person who receives help has a real need. Every message asking for help may represent someone struggling. Once you become known as a person who says yes, saying no becomes painful. That creates emotional pressure. Because Martin and Daniel cannot help everyone. No channel can. No family business can clean every yard, answer every request, and solve every hardship. But when you are the person driving past an overgrown home, knowing it might belong to someone elderly, disabled, or struggling, it is hard not to feel responsible. That is the burden behind the videos. The audience gets a before and after. Martin gets the faces. The woman who cried. The homeowner who felt ashamed. The family afraid of fines. The disabled resident who could not maintain the yard. The person who may not have anyone else coming. That is not just content. That is emotional weight. And it explains why Martin's story has value beyond lawn care. He represents a kind of help that is rare online because it is practical. He is not only raising awareness. He is not only giving advice. He is doing the thing. Cutting the grass. Clearing the brush. Restoring the space. That kind of action is powerful because it is visible. But it also takes a toll because it cannot be faked. You can fake a motivational speech. You cannot fake 8 hours in a yard under the Texas sun. That is what happened to Martin. The audience discovered the mission. The mission grew. The expectations grew. And the man at the center had to keep being a real worker, not just an online symbol. Daniel's role became the future. The story of Martin is also the story of Daniel. At first, Daniel was a son learning beside his father. Over time, he became more visible, more responsible, and more central to the operation. He helped communicate with homeowners, film projects, manage the social media side, and carry the physical workload. That transition matters. Because M&D Lawn Care is not only a business story, it is a generational story. Martin built the foundation. Daniel helped translate it into the modern world. Martin had the years of experience, the discipline, and the work ethic. Daniel had the youth, the camera instincts, the language bridge, and the ability to connect the work to an online audience. Together, they became something neither one would have been alone. That is why the father-son chemistry became so important. Viewers were not only watching yards get restored, they were watching a trade path from one generation to the next. Daniel learned by doing. He learned how to judge a property, how to handle equipment, how to keep going when the job looked too big, and how to treat people with dignity. And Martin, whether he intended it or not, taught something larger. He taught that work is not only about money. That does not mean money is unimportant. Paid lawn care is what helps make the free project possible. A business cannot survive on applause. But Martin showed that work can also be service, that the same equipment used for income can sometimes be used for mercy. Daniel absorbed that lesson in public. That may be the real future of M&D Lawn Care. Not whether Martin appears in every shot forever. Not whether the upload schedule is exactly what viewers want. But whether the values remain as Daniel takes on more responsibility. And from what is publicly visible, that is exactly what has happened. Martin remains part of the work. Daniel carries more of the operation, and the channel's identity still revolve around real projects, real homeowners, and real transformations. That is not a disappearance. That is a handoff. Slow, natural, and still happening. What really happened to Martin? So what really happened to Martin from M&D Lawn Care? He did not vanish. He did not get exposed as fake. He did not abandon the mission. He became a man caught between three worlds. The first world is the old business, local lawn care, paid customers, equipment costs, and the responsibility of keeping a family operation stable. The second world is the outreach, free yards, struggling homeowners, community service, and the desire to help people who cannot afford help. The third world is the internet, views, subscribers, comments, expectations, upload schedules, news attention, and people wanting more of the story every week. Most creators only have to manage the third world. Martin had to manage all three while still doing the physical work. That is the hidden truth. M&D Lawn Care became famous because it felt simple, but behind the simplicity was a complicated balancing act. Every free project had to be paid for somehow. Every video required labor before editing. Every act of kindness had a real cost in time, fuel, energy, and recovery. And Martin was approaching an age where that kind of work becomes harder to hide. He could still work. He could still appear on projects. He could still operate equipment and help people. But no one can outrun the reality of physical labor forever. At some point, the body asks for a different pace. The business asks for structure. The son steps forward. The father does not disappear. He adjusts. That is what viewers were really seeing. Not the end of Martin. The evolution of Martin. He went from local business owner to community helper to online inspiration to father passing more responsibility to his son. The channel changed because life changed. And the fact that it changed should not be treated as a failure. It should be treated as proof that the work was real. Because real people do not upload forever at the same speed. Real people get tired. Real businesses have busy seasons. Real families protect parts of their private life. Real service work gets messy, expensive, and emotionally heavy. The internet often wants kindness to look effortless. Martin's story shows that it is not. Kindness takes gas money. Kindness takes sweat. Kindness takes scheduling. Kindness takes choosing one family when you know 10 more need help. Kindness takes a father and son giving away hours they could have sold. That is why people connected to M&D Lawn Care in the first place. They were not watching a